people, me again obviously, Moreno Ravenberg as always and as usual. Yeah, as you can tell, I am going to discuss shapeshifting in this video. The merit of shapeshifting, whether it's real, whether it's legit, blah blah blah, etc, etc. I'm gonna keep it as short as possible and really quick. Now, before I continue, as always, you can find anything interesting. There is an article associated with this video. You can find it linked in the description. I heavily recommend that you read this article because I'm not going to recite what I have written down in the article. The article hits home arguably more than this video, but this video, as usual, is for people that want to hear it explained and see. They want to attach a voice to the story as a whole or the article rather than just read it, rather than just literature. For those on the opposite end of the so-called spectrum regarding intentions and desires, read the article. Now, this video is going to be embedded in this article, obviously, for me, obvious at least. Now, shape-shifting. Most people are familiar with shape-shifting, and most people in the world, they have a general idea on what shape-shifting is, as in, like those guys that can like turn into animals, right? Like those skinwalkers, like those horror folk tales you hear about guys being able to turn into animals and stuff like that, and they can like move around so rapidly to the point where you can't even see them. Isn't that where the name shapeshifter comes from? Blah 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 blah. That's the general consensus that people have in the term, in terms of a definition, the definition of shape-shifting. Other things related to shape-shifting are like werewolves, so lycanthropy, lycanthropy, and so on and so forth. It just goes on, all those things relating to it. Now, shape-shifting, the way you see, for example, portrayed in popular media and whatnot, like in a horror movie or something, it's interesting and fascinating, but it's honestly, especially by mundane standards, unrealistic. The sheer amount of energy that would be required, both from a spiritual as well as a scientific perspective, the sheer amount of components required, regardless of how you want to phrase it, the sheer amount of effort required to turn into a different species of creature. So to go from human being, for example, to canine or to feline, let alone being able to do so, it's ludicrous to say the least. Let alone being able to do so in the span of seconds. Nah, I mean, come on. From a scientific perspective, you already can imagine to literally have your physical cells, your body cells, like undergo such drastic transformations to the point where you turn into another living creature of a different species, let alone like something else, like non-mammalian, like something that isn't a mammal, because human beings are classified as mammals, obviously, and like most other animals, like dogs, cats, and whatnot, they're mammals, as far as I know. Yeah, let alone a reptile or something else, like a snake or a frog or something. No, it's just unrealistic to say the least, honestly. Of course, it's not impossible. Nothing is impossible, but my point is, Now, from an occult perspective, from a spiritual perspective, it is doable and it's more realistic, but still quite far-fetched. The sheer amount of spiritual energy that would be required, and the amount of even when it doesn't boil down to energy, the amount of effort you will have to put into accomplishing something like this would be something akin or equivalent to winning the lottery, more or less. Just an example. In terms of what you're trying to accomplish, the magnitude, it's just extraordinary to say the least, and by mundane standards it's implausible. Okay, metaphorically only, it's impossible. It's just even possible, the concept or notion of possibility set aside, it's impractical to say the least, because the benefits, the drawbacks by the sheer effort alone by far exceed any benefit you can have in doing so. So honestly, I would say any person to not bother. Now, what is meant with shape-shifting or skinwalking, all of that stuff is real, but it's not real in the way that most people think. I already explained all of that just now. The realistic version thereof are, for example, people that carry out rituals, and during these rituals they invoke, so they call upon the energies of certain animals. And they do so with the explicit purpose of, with the main purpose of adopting, obviously temporarily, the properties or attributes, beneficial properties and or attributes of that animal. And that's where the whole concept of shape-shifting comes from. So imagine Native Americans sitting around a campfire. Obviously, no offense meant to Native Americans in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying, just as an example, Native American tribesmen sitting around the campfire, they're all smoking, etc. They smoke so that they can get into an altered state of mind, which they know at a base level is necessary for getting into a higher state of being, a state of mind. They're increasing their spiritual vibrations. You know, it's their equivalent of hallucinogens, if you will. And they essentially start, a couple amongst them start doing that. They start invoking spirits from animals that they admire, specifically like bears, eagles, whatnot, as in, I want the speed and the ferocity of an eagle. I want to soar through the air like an eagle. And another guy is like, I want to be as strong as a bear. I want the brutal strength of a bear. It just goes on. And so on and so forth, you know. And what happens is that these guys, during these rituals, they deliberately they summon the energies, or they convert their own spiritual energy, one of the two, or I want to say both, but no, more the former than the latter, one of the two. I think more the latter in general has been throughout mankind's history. But again, I think, I'm not entirely sure. And then they simply they convert their energy into, again, in the article, you'll find another article that I embedded called Channeling Different Types of Energy. I also have a video on that that's also in the article, quite interesting. It relates directly to what I'm saying, that's why I'm bringing it up. They essentially they call upon the energy of a bear, specifically that aspect, the strength of a bear, nothing else, not the drawbacks or anything. The strength of a bear. They convert their own energy into essentially spiritual bear energy, specifically that attribute. Then you can see for yourself how it comes off. They'll start behaving like a bear, they'll start making bear noises or noises similar to a bear. And yes, it's like it has like a placebo effect from a scientific perspective. From an occult perspective, that's the whole point of generating and or invoking energy. You're specifically generating energy towards an intended goal, and you will become stronger, at least temporarily, obviously, until the energy fades, or generally speaking, temporary. And that's what these guys do. And obviously that guy is going to temporarily he's going to be stronger, not necessarily as strong as a bear, but he is going to be as strong as miscellaneous conditions allow that to be the case. So he'll have a heightened sense of strength, miscellaneous conditions being how much energy he converted into bear strength energy, how long the energy lasts, you name it, his personality, all of that stuff. Okay, his state of mind, his level of concentration. So he'll be a lot stronger to the point where the guy can do things like bend metal even, you name it. Okay, although that is a little far-fetched, but I meant it as a figure of speech. And for, you know, the eagle guy, it's the same thing. Now, we move on to the onlookers. Imagine the guys around that campfire. They're already, like, stoned out of their mind, bluntly put. Now, they're in an altered state of mind. What do you think they're seeing? They're not seeing the guys that have invoked that energy. They're seeing the energy that these gentlemen invoke, because they're in an altered, a heightened state of mind where they're specifically attuned to see the spiritual and not the material. The material becomes minimized. So they see things in like a haze, and what do they see? They see that, for example, John turned into a bear. And they're like, hey John, oh wow, that's awesome, you turned into a bear, God, that's so cool, and it just goes on. That's more or less how I, based on my knowledge, or to my knowledge and understanding, how the whole myth around shapeshifters got started. There are other examples. For example, people suffering from rabies or some other violent disease that turns them into like rabbit-looking monsters, like animals. You know, you've seen someone that was affected by rabies. They display the same signs that like a dog would display, any canine, for example. They would start foaming from the mouth. They would start engaging in cannibalism, attacking other people, biting them, stuff like that. And again, that's also most likely where like lycanthropy comes from. So the concept of being a werewolf, but actually turning into a werewolf, I already stated that at the beginning. The improbability of that. It's just, honestly, from a mundane perspective, it's laughable. But my point is, this is where at the root cause, to my knowledge and understanding at least, this kind of stuff originated from. And as you can tell, it all makes sense. That's also why tribal warriors, they always, like, generally speaking, doesn't matter what ancient culture or ancient civilization you look at. You can look at the Aztecs, the Mayas, the Incas, etc. What do they always do? They, more often than not, they dress like animals. Native Americans, they dress like animals. They always, like, even with Native Americans, the whole concept of a spirit animal enters the equation. It essentially, because they wanted to, since they lived in nature, they were part of nature, you know, they lived alongside other animals, and well, peacefully or not so peacefully, depending on your point of view or perspective, it really doesn't matter within the context of this conversation or topic. Then they by default had an admiration for certain animals based on quintessential attributes such as agility, flexibility, swiftness, speed, strength. So they wanted to harness those properties for their own as human beings. You know, especially when you compare us to other animals at a brute level, we're not really strong. We don't have claws, we don't have jaws that are capable of crushing bone. You know, compared to most animals, we're quite weak and we're physically timid, honestly. We're not really intimidating, etc. The thing that makes man the dominant species on the planet is our intelligence, our ability to rationalize, and the fact that we're simply at the top of the food chain, okay, spiritually. That's why it said man was given dominion over the animals, and obviously not the other way around. Now, but obviously at a primitive base level, animals, a lot of animals, especially predatory animals, are stronger than us. And of course they are. Their livelihoods depend on that, on these traits, on these attributes. So people wanted to harness that for their own, you know, and that's why these warriors, for example, more often than not, when they went to war with another tribe or whomever they went to war with, whomever they went to war with, what they did is that they always used to, like, dress themselves as much as an animal as possible. For example, they wore leopard skin, they wore any kind of animal skin of a predatory animal, generally speaking, and they often made, like, noises trying to mimic these animals, or just general war cries. You name it. All of that is essentially to put them in a transcendental, I want to say, state of mind, a heightened state of mind, either way, that gives them an edge in battle. I mean, even when you think about berserkers, like Scandinavian berserkers, that, I'm not sure if that has its roots so much in, like, in the whole animalistic concept that I'm explaining. But my point is, you can see it's also quite similar. It all involves temporarily heightening your battle power by and your overall faculties that are needed to win a fight, a physical slugging match. Temporarily heightening yourself by putting yourself in an altered state of mind, like that. So these warriors, more often than not, thought that, hey, if I can harness the strength of a bear and make it my own, I'm capable of wiping out a dozen guys all by myself the same way a bear would. And that's where, at a root level, the whole concept of shape-shifting comes from, and skinwalking, and anything that you can equate to a man turning into a non-human creature, you know, or just plain man turning into a man-human creature. So yeah, that's essentially it. I'll hear it if there are any other questions, as always, and as usual. Goodbye, guys, until next time.